Hey, you may have heard that Liam Payne, former member of One Direction, died this week. It is an awful story. There are a lot of layers to untangle with this one. We have a lot to talk about. Yes, about the 1D fandom, but also about the way that this death has been covered by the media. The group chat is here. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Look, I think maybe the best place to start is by going all the way back to the beginning. Okay, what you're hearing is Liam Payne auditioning for X Factor. You're hearing 16-year-old Liam Payne. If you're a One Direction fan, then you kind of know how the rest of the story goes. Liam didn't make it on the show as a solo act, but then in this magical sequence, he gets assembled into this boy band. You know, literally just a bunch of Polaroid photos laid out next to each other, and then they go, "Yeah, this looks good. This is the band," and they call them One Direction, and then they go on to sell 70 million records. Their first 4 albums all debuted at number 1, and just to jog your memory, they gave us these.
We always find a way to make it out alive. Thought we were going strong. Thought we were holding on, aren't we? You and me got a whole lot of history. We could be the greatest thing that the world has ever seen.
One Direction did the thing that bands don't normally do. They went on hiatus in 2016 at the height of their popularity. Fans have been holding their breath, holding on to this dream of a reunion ever since. And now that dream is no longer possible. This week, Liam Payne died after falling from a hotel balcony in Argentina. He was 31 years old. The group chat is here. Kathleen Newman-Bremang is here. Joan Summers is here. And Syrus Marcus Ware is here. Kathleen, Joan, Syrus, welcome to the show, folks.
Hi, nice to see you.
I love seeing all of you. I'm so sorry it's under these grim circumstances. But Kathleen, if I can just start with you, maybe you want to walk us through some of the highlight moments of Liam's career.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that medley brought me back because I was working at Much Music at the height of One Direction's rise. And I saw up close, not only how popular they were, but how intense that love was from their screaming fans. It was the classic boy band pandemonium. And for an entire generation, One Direction, was their boy band. And even though Liam, wasn't the heartthrob or the most popular, let's say, he did have a special place in the band. He had a role and he was also beloved. Mm-hmm. And as his bandmate Zayn referred to in a really touching tribute to Liam, he was the most musically informed of all the boys, when they were coming up. Liam co-wrote some of their biggest hits, and X Factor started it all in his career.
Yeah.
Liam first auditioned at 14. He didn't make it, as you mentioned, came back at 16, became a member of One Direction. And that is, as successful and as high as it would get for him career-wise.
Yeah.
But he did continue on with a solo effort. He shifted more towards EDM and hip hop, leaning more towards EDM in the later years. He had, a high-profile romance with X Factor judge Cheryl Cole. They share a son. In 2017, he released a single with Quavo that reached the Billboard Top 10. And when he was 25, he released his first and only solo album. His last song, Teardrops, came out in March. And the last thing he was working on reportedly was a new Netflix singing competition reality show called Building the Band with Nicole Scherzinger and Kelly Rowland, which has yet to be released. And that was potentially going to be the thing to bring him back into the spotlight.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, Joan, that Liam was one of the ones who are still sort of searching for our way back in ways that Niall has not been, in ways that Zayn has not been, in ways that Harry certainly has kind of just been ever present throughout. But maybe let's focus a little bit on Liam becoming famous as a 16-year-old, because I think his persona and his relationship to fans, to fandom, to fame in general changed a lot over the years. You're a directioner. Do you want to describe that change, Joan?
Yeah, I mean, I started listening to One Direction in high school. I mean, Up All Night came out my junior year of high school. I bought it at Streetlight Records in Santa Cruz. And I think, most into Zayn and Liam. One, because Zayn was the bad boy, and also because Liam was sort of like the normal every guy, that it sort of was like he got picked up the street. You know, he had this fantasy of like anyone could be famous. You know, he seemed sort of like flustered by it all.
Yeah.
But very quickly after One Direction, he changed quite a bit. I mean, like many child stars of his generation, he felt very confined by the music. He felt very confined by the persona. He released a string of singles that tried to like push the boundaries of his image and sort of bad boy him up. You know, he came out with tattoos, and he, I think, really, really struggled throughout his early solo career with the expectation of being a boy bander, and in private had personal struggles with substances like alcohol, admittedly, in 2019, that I think also overshadowed a lot of sort of his post One Direction, mid One Direction rise to fame.
We've heard Liam talk about how the weird highs of fame, the idea like you get on stage and thousands of people are screaming at you, and then you get this sort of like adrenaline rush from it, and then after that, you know, this is I'm quoting from an interview that he had, and he says you go back to the hotel because you can't go anywhere else because people would sort of like, you know, completely just like overwhelm you, and then the only thing you have in the hotel is a minibar, and that's kind of how he sort of began to turn to alcohol. Syrus, I want to talk a little bit about how every generation feels like it has a moment like this one. Like every generation sort of loses a teen idol in this way. Where does this story take you?
I mean, immediately I'm thinking about, you know, being in the late years of high school and Kurt Cobain dying. I mean, you know, when Kurt Cobain died from Nirvana, you know, so many of us were just completely racked with grief. And it was, you know, again, such a tragic story. And again, someone who had really struggled with the realities of fame. And I think about my parents' generation and them, you know, Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and all of these folks who are, you know, Liam was 31, but a lot of these folks are sort of pre-27, you know, in that sort of Forever 27 club. So to me, it reminds me of losing Kurt Cobain and of that significant moment. And I think for a generation of young people who have grown up with these people, who have grown up with these celebrities whose music has been the backdrop of their life, it can be really traumatizing to suddenly have this gap, this loss, and to be dealing with grief at a young age.
Well, I was gonna say, Syrus, you also like you have a teenage daughter. Like so in some ways you could maybe relate to this in two different aspects. What are the kind of conversations you guys are having about this right now?
I mean, as soon as the news broke about Liam's death, the family chat was activated with all of the teens, my niece and nephew and my daughter messaging and talking, and they were really gripped by the story. One of the things that I've been talking to my daughter about is, one, of course, the reality that death is you know, part of life and that people do die, and just for her to get to accept that, you know, grief is part of an everyday life experience, but also for her to be able to know that it's okay to reach out if you're struggling, that if things are really difficult, you know, it is possible to reach out to other people in your life, to older adults, to other people who can support you, so that you don't have to feel alone and isolated, perhaps in some of the ways that this person was.
Kathleen, there's so many layers to this story, and one layer that I'm really interested in is the TMZ layer of the story, because TMZ is the first was the first media organization to report on this, and I was like genuinely shocked. Like I had a sort of full body shock reaction to sort of opening the TMZ article and seeing that they had published partial images of his body. Liam died. We know that he fell out of a balcony in Argentina. But TMZ publishing those photos was a shock to me. They've since removed those photos. How did you react when you opened up that page?
Yeah, there was also shock and frustration because, as you said, they were the first to report it. So you click on the link to find out more information, right? And then you're met with these horrifying images. And so I was enraged that they made that decision, you know, for the sake of clicks, to prove that they got the scoop or whatever inhumane reason it was that they chose to do that. But then, you know, when I took a step back from the shock and the rage, I wasn't actually surprised. You know, it speaks to the vitriolic heartlessness of tabloid culture overall. But this is what TMZ does. You know, Vanessa Bryant had to learn about the death of her husband, Kobe, and their daughter, Gianna, through TMZ. You know, this is the outlet that published a video of Nipsey Hussle being shot several times. They published photos of the dead bodies of celebrities in the past. And what they are really doing is stripping these people and their families of dignity and death. And finding out that your loved one died through photos of their dead body on TMZ is a nightmare. Like, I can't even imagine. It's sick. It's not journalism. And I know people equate TMZ with journalism, but this wasn't ethical or up to any journalistic standard. You know, they are vultures, and you would think that they learned a lesson since, as you mentioned, they took down those photos, but I have no faith that they won't do it again. And when I think about it, I really hope that whoever made that decision to publish these photos of Liam Payne has a hard time looking at themselves in the mirror and sleeping at night, at the very least.
Joan, I want to come to you on this in just a moment, because I think the child star element of this adds another dimension. But maybe Syrus, I want to put this to you. Does this feel like a new low for tabloid entertainment reporting, or does it feel kind of par for the course? Because it sounds like Kathleen is like saying, like, I'm shocked, but also I did kind of expect something like that to happen.
I mean, absolutely. Just when you think they couldn't go lower, there's something like this that happens. There's absolutely no need to, publish the images of someone. It's like, like a snuff video or like a snuff film. We don't need to see images of someone's recently deceased body in this sort of glorification of the gore and of the horror of life. It absolutely seems like a strange choice, considering the age of the fans of this star. And so many young people would have clicked ahead to the TMZ story just to be able to find out what was happening with their favorite One Direction member, and now are seeing images. I think everyone would remember the first time they saw an image of a dead body. A whole bunch of teens just saw that this week, and it was absolutely unnecessary.
Joan, you've covered child stardom a lot in your work. We've kind of heard a little bit, we've talked a little bit about how Liam Payne started out as a teen on television, went on to this huge success, but then he's had all these struggles with drugs and alcohol. The 911 call that that kind of came out of Argentina, you hear them mention that somebody's been using drugs and alcohol in this. We don't exactly have the entire confirmation that is a 911 call, but that's the one that's being reported right now. As you kind of look at the story and all the different ideas of a man who appears to be in crisis, BBC reporting on all these troubling allegations of the way that he treated his ex-girlfriend. There's maybe a cease and desist letter involved in that. Where does that take you in terms of hearing the way that this story has been covered and how we think about child stardom?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of my work, what I really grapple with covering these stories, whether it's Liam Payne or recently like Nickelodeon, we've covered like Ariana, Demi, Justin, all of them. The fact that we can even like have too many to list here. Yeah. Thankfully, there are so many that make it out okay, but there are also many, many child stars that do not make it out okay. And it is an industry with a body count. It is an industry with a legacy of pain. And every time a story like this happens, the first thought that I have is like, when is it going to be enough? Like, when is our culture going to seriously grapple with the fact that we consume a form of entertainment throughout our lives, whether as adults or as children, with One Direction, in my age, starting as a teenager. Yeah. And that industry that we participate in produces such like unimaginable horrors in people's lives. And it's not just in these child stars' lives, like with so much trauma in everyday life, the pain that they go through ripples out into their communities. It ripples out into their families, their children, and their other coworkers. They go on to sort of maybe reenact systems of abuse that maybe they were put through as well. And it's interesting to me that the first thought is always like, oh God, look, there it is, another one, right? The fact that we even have a pattern to point to troubles me. And I really don't know what it takes to get people to really think like, something has to change about the way that children in this industry are treated. And also, there have to be protections put in place much younger that are much firmer. That maybe means we don't get to enjoy the sort of stuff we get to enjoy right now.
My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and the show is called Commotion. And today we are talking about Liam Payne's death and the way that story has been covered in the media. Kathleen, one of the things that I've done today is I went back and watched the video of the judges on the X Factor putting together One Direction. And they were sort of like deliberating over a series of photographs over like who to keep and who not to keep. And you see Nicole Scherzinger, who is one of the judges, get really excited about the prospect of piecing together all these Polaroids of photos. And one of the things that she says is the young girls are going to go crazy over these people. And she's sort of pointing at Harry and pointing at Niall, and then she puts Liam's photo on the stack, and then they look at them and they say, they look great together. They look great together. And the notion, like the idea of the name One Direction suggests this can only go up, right? This can only go up. But then I'm thinking about this idea of One Direction today, and the concept of the name as like, it kind of always has one of these stories. It has one of these tragedies at the end of it. And so when you think about what Joan just said, the idea that this industry has a body count, does it feel that grim to you? The idea that we are participants in wanting, young, very talented stars to be together and sort of achieve this level of fame, but there's a cost, and it seems like there's a cost that we exact by demanding that over and over.
Yeah. I think I'm really sitting with what Joan just said. And, in reading about Liam and, this year, we've had so many stories like Nickelodeon with which is what Joan just referenced, and Demi Lovato's documentary. Yeah. It does feel like we are complicit. And so when you watch that video and you see Nicole Scherzinger put his face up on that Polaroid up, you think she is signing this life to him that obviously did not end up as well as it could have. And what did we have? What responsibility do we have as consumers in that? And so, I'm really sitting with it. I think that it is about overhauling the industry and putting regulations in place and putting the safety of children first and foremost. Yeah. I think that's what we have to take away from all of this.
I mean, they are children, and these they really look like young children. It's really startling because it was so long ago. It was 2010. So it's really, like, I guess you sometimes forget, especially when you see the levels of fame that they've all achieved. You forget just like how truly children they were when you see those photos. Joan, I think it's fair to say that Liam was not the most popular member of One Direction, and yet this reaction has been like quite enormous, and I think there's something to that. Can you just talk a little bit about how the Directioners maybe contributed to the blueprint of online fandom that we see today?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because if you were in sort of like the Directioner fandom back in the day and sort of saw the way that the different people were treated, Liam was never the most popular. He was not people's favorites. They didn't think of him as the pretty boy, the nice boy, the like rebellious one, the bad boy like Zayn. He was sort of like the odd man out often. Yeah. And so to see such an outpouring for him is interesting in hindsight to that, right? And I think that the One Directioners are probably one of the primary blueprints for the way that online fandoms interact with celebrities now. They, largely formed in online forum communities, sort of at the tail end of LiveJournal, but also Tumblr very specifically. Yeah. And when those sites sort of fragmented and this like huge mass, this huge concentration of people that were sort of the primary players on those platforms. I mean, if you were on Tumblr as a teenager, it was like a lot of Harry Potter content, a lot of Doctor Who content, and then a bunch of One Direction content.
That's right, yeah.
And when that splintered off, those people went and, formed their own communities. They found new bands as the band broke up. They found sort of like new niche interests, but the blueprint was there. And they obviously were not the first boy band. They were not the first boy band to have a craze around them by any means. But I think that they sort of formed at a very pivotal time in the way that we interact online, the way that teens have access to the internet. That was completely unprecedented. The fact that most teens, if they didn't have a phone in their pocket, they had a phone in their home, they had a phone in their bedroom, and very quickly had a phone in their pocket. And they could take it anywhere with them. They could be connected across countries. They could be connected across states, language barriers. And you can see now the way that these online communities form. I always sort of feel the shadow of One Direction over so many of them, even down to some of the more unsavory aspects, like the interpersonal abuse, the harassment, the stalking, the way that they like mastered getting a hold of people's private information, what hotels they're staying in. Like, I remember sort of witnessing that firsthand on the internet as a teenager and being like, it's crazy that someone can find out what hotel a famous person is staying in now on the internet. And that was sort of something that One Directioners were really spearheading. And I think for all the sort of rosy aspects of it that I feel at times for that time in my life, there is also like Oh, wow. We actually sort of set up the next like 15 years of, not myself personally, but just like the people I saw, set up like the next 15 years of online celebrity culture.
Yeah, you're not personally responsible for this, Joan, but certainly it was an acceleration of you take the boy band fandom of the 90s and the early 2000s and you add the internet, and that is a potent mix. And like that is how, you know, the modern fandom is kind of built on this idea of what Directioners gave us. I'm going to leave it there on this topic. And then, but just before we move on, Liam Payne's family released a statement. They said, they quote, "We are heartbroken and Liam will live forever in our hearts. We'll remember him for his kind, funny and brave soul." His former One Direction bandmates, Harry and Niall and Lewis and Zayn, also released a joint statement. They said, "The memories we shared with him will be treasured forever. We will miss him terribly." For more on this story, go to cbcnews.ca. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and you're listening to Commotion. I want to switch gears and just really quickly talk about this fascinating story of this Norwegian reporter. Her name is Kjersti Flaa. She went viral over the summer when she posted this old interview with Blake Lively. Kjersti said the experience was so uncomfortable it made her want to quit her job. And then she's posted more interview clips like this one, like, for example, more recently with Anne Hathaway. Take a listen to this.
So I was going to ask you to do the first question in singing. Can I sing it to you and you can sing back the answer?
Well, I won't be doing that, but you're more than welcome to sing.
Do you feel that love was more passionate back then? Or people would sacrifice more for love than we do today?
No.
No?
No.
Do you remember your first crush?
No.
You don't? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate that Joan is literally covering her face as she listens to that awkwardness of that interview. Syrus, what's your reaction to this old Anne Hathaway interview?
Okay, to be honest, I get it. And we don't know how many interviews Anne had done that day. And as somebody who gets interviewed a lot, you know, sometimes you're doing 2, 3, 4 pickups in one day, you know, covering something. And, you know, so for the reporter, maybe this is the first interview of the day, or maybe this is the person that's doing, and so they want to have some fun questions. But for you who's been asked maybe 15 questions already by 4 different people, you know, you can get to the point where you're like, no, I'm not singing the response back. Like, please let me just finish up this interview. And then I can go back to the hotel and have pizza like a normal person. That's what my goal is. And so I think that, you know, I understand it. While at the same time, you know, I do know that when we're invited to be interviewed, you know, we're supposed to answer not with yes and no questions. We're supposed to keep the conversation going. There's an art to this. And that is part of what's expected for you when you know, agree to an interview. So I think Anne could have been a bit more forthcoming with her responses, but I also absolutely get it. I absolutely get it.
The reason we're talking about this today is because it is another signal of just like how the media, sort of like the celebrity media ecosystem has changed a lot, because Anne Hathaway's had to apologize. Well, she didn't have to apologize, but she apologized because this clip went viral. Kjersti told the New York Times that she hasn't shared, you know, all these interviews before because she was worried about getting backlash. But now she's willing to share them because, quote, "Now the times are a little different." She may be releasing more interviews. What do you think she meant by the times have changed? Joan cannot handle this. Kathleen, a minute to you, pal. Go.
Okay, so in that New York Times piece, I think she's referring to the idea that back when she did these interviews, people would be more quick to blame the interviewer, right? If the celeb was rude. And now she thinks more people are more open to understanding that celebrities, you know, can be the villain, right? And I think that she's right to some extent. You know, look at what's happening with Chappell Roan. You know, there's definitely the sentiment of that, like, famous people work for us and owe us because they are rich and famous. But on the other hand, stan culture has never been like bigger. So if she says anything about your girl, Taylor Swift, we'll see, you know, how that goes over. No. I do think that like relitigating these old interviews is in poor taste. And I think as someone who's on the other side, who does these kind of junket interviews, if I had cringy clips like this, you couldn't pay me to release them.
Thank you.
And sometimes, you know, you ask bad questions, and make no mistake, those questions to Anne Hathaway were bad questions. You get the answers you deserve. She should have just taken the L. It happens to the best of us. But she's, you know, I think she's chasing clout and clicks and attention, and she got what she wanted. She got an apology from Anne Hathaway. I just quit while you're ahead. Do not give us any more bad interviews, please.
I truly like live for Kathleen Newman-Bremang going in. Like, that's Kathleen on activated mode is my entire jam. Okay, we also have 15 seconds, so I got to leave it there. But Syrus and Joan and Kathleen, you guys are the best. This has been a delight. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back next week. See you then.